He drank from the forbidden spring, and a voice whispered, "You belong to me." People in the village knew him as quiet and thoughtful, someone who often wandered alone, talking to himself only when he was sure no one was listening. Armin was not afraid of hard work. He spent his days helping his neighbors, tending to small tasks, and doing whatever was needed to earn a living. But beneath this calm exterior, there was a part of him that felt restless. He often gazed at the hills beyond the village, at the dense patches of forest, and wondered what lay beyond. It was as if something invisible was calling to him, whispering that life held more than the simple, predictable routines he had grown accustomed to. The village itself was full of stories, some funny, some sad, and some that made people shiver when they remembered them. One story in particular everyone spoke of in hushed voices, warned of a spring deep in the forest. It was not like the small wells or streams people used to get water for their daily needs. This spring was hidden, surrounded by wild trees and overgrown shrubs. Its water was said to be unusually clear, almost sparkling, but it was forbidden. The elders claimed that anyone who drank from it would be touched by something they could not understand, something that belonged neither to the living nor to the natural world. Children were told not to go near it, and even grown-ups avoided that part of the forest. Yet Armin could not stop thinking about it. He did not believe in ghosts or spirits, nor did he think that water could hold magic or power. Still, the curiosity gnawed at him. There was something about the way the wind moved through that part of the forest, something in the way the trees seemed to lean closer together, as if guarding a secret. People in the village often passed by the forest without noticing it, but Armin saw it differently. The spring had become a mystery, a puzzle he needed to solve, even if only to prove to himself that the warnings were just stories made to scare children. Days passed, and Armin's thoughts about the spring grew stronger. He began asking questions, but no one gave him real answers. Some shook their heads, warning him not to meddle with things he could not understand. Others laughed and said he was imagining things, that the spring was just water and nothing more. But Armin could not let it go. Every night he dreamed of the forest, of walking down a narrow path where sunlight barely touched the ground, and hearing the faint sound of water. The dreams were vivid, almost real, and each morning he woke with a strange sense of anticipation, as if something was waiting for him. The tension inside him grew. It was not fear that drove him, but a feeling he could not name. It was as if the spring was calling him, not with words but with a pull he could not resist. Even when he worked during the day, helping neighbors with their chores or tending to animals, his mind wandered. He imagined the spring sparkling in the sunlight, imagining what it would feel like to take a single sip, and imagining the secrets it might hold. Sometimes he would catch himself staring at the edge of the forest for hours, lost in thought, until someone called his name, snapping him back to reality. One evening, after finishing his daily work, Armin decided to walk closer to the forbidden part of the forest. He did not tell anyone, knowing that if he did, they would only try to stop him. He carried a small bag with water, some bread, and a thin blanket. The forest at the edge of the village looked different at sunset. The shadows grew long and twisted, the birds became silent, and the air carried a strange stillness. Armin's heart beat faster, not from fear, but from a mixture of excitement and curiosity. Each step he took felt heavy with anticipation. The further he walked, the more he noticed the changes. The trees seemed taller here, their leaves darker. The ground was soft with fallen leaves, and the air smelled sweet but strange, almost like a mixture of rain and earth. As he walked deeper, he remembered the stories the elders had told him. They spoke of travelers who had entered the forest and never returned, or who came back changed in ways no one could explain. Some said the spring belonged to something beyond human understanding, a force that demanded respect and obedience. Armin shook his head and told himself that these were just stories, but he could not deny the sense of weight pressing down on him, as if the forest itself was aware of his presence. Each step forward felt like a choice he could not undo. By the time the first stars appeared in the sky, Armin had reached a small clearing. In the center, hidden among thick bushes, he glimpsed the spring for the first time. The water shimmered under the fading light, clear and inviting, like it was alive. He felt an overwhelming urge to go closer. The air around him seemed to vibrate, and a soft sound of trickling water reached his ears, though the forest was otherwise silent. For a moment, he stood frozen, unsure whether to proceed. All the warnings, all the stories flashed through his mind, but the pull was stronger than his caution. Armin knelt by the edge of the spring, studying the water. He noticed how it reflected the sky above, how it seemed deeper than any pond he had seen. He touched the surface with his fingers and the coldness startled him. It was unlike any water he had felt before, sharp and almost alive, sending a strange energy through his hand. He hesitated. Should he drink? The elders had warned him. The stories of the village warned him. Yet the voice inside, soft and unexplainable, told him that this was something he was meant to do. He felt a connection he could not name, a sense that this spring had been waiting for him as much as he had been waiting for it. As the night deepened, Armin sat beside the spring, watching its surface shimmer in the moonlight. He felt a strange peace, as if the forest itself had accepted him. But beneath that calm was a growing tension, a feeling that something was about to change. He did not yet know what, but he sensed that the night would bring answers, and that once he drank from the spring, nothing in his life would remain the same. For the first time in many months, Armin felt fully awake, fully alive. The forest seemed to hold its breath, waiting, and he realized that this moment was the beginning of something far greater than he could imagine. The forbidden spring was no longer just a story. It was real, and it was calling to him. And though he did not know it yet, the choice he was about to make would set him on a path from which there would be no turning back. The night around Armin had grown darker, yet the clearing where the spring lay seemed strangely bright. Moonlight spilled over the water, making it shimmer as if it held tiny stars within. Armin could not take his eyes off it. His heart pounded in his chest, a mixture of fear, excitement, and something he could not name. He had heard the warnings all his life, stories from elders about people who had come close to the spring and never returned the same. Yet, there he was, kneeling beside it, drawn by a force he could not resist. He reached out and touched the water again. It was colder than any stream or pond he had ever known, sharp and almost electric. It ran over his fingers like liquid glass, leaving a tingling warmth behind. He hesitated, recalling the words of the village elders. "Do not drink," they had said. "It is not meant for humans. It will claim what is yours and make it its own." But curiosity and something deeper, something he felt was destiny, pushed him forward. He cupped the water in his hands, raising it to his lips. The first sip shocked him. The cold burned in his throat, but not painfully. It was as if the water carried life inside it, a strange energy that filled him, seeping into his bones. At first, he felt nothing unusual, only the chill lingering on his tongue. But then it came, a faint whisper, soft and distant, barely audible. He froze, holding his breath. The voice was not loud, but it was clear, echoing inside his mind rather than through the air. "You belong to me," the voice said. Armin jerked his head around, scanning the forest, expecting to see someone standing there. But the clearing was empty. Only the spring sparkled under the moon, and the trees swayed gently in the wind. The whisper came again, closer this time, wrapping around his thoughts like a thread he could not untangle. He felt a chill run down his spine, but it was not entirely fear. There was something almost familiar about the tone, something that tugged at the deepest part of him, like a memory he had never lived. He wanted to run, to leave the spring and forget he had ever been there, but his body refused to move. It was as if the water itself had anchored him in place. The voice spoke again, soft but insistent. "You are mine." Armin's mind raced. Was this real? Was he imagining it? He had always believed in reason and logic, but in this moment neither seemed to matter. The world around him felt different, sharper, quieter, and yet filled with a presence he could feel but not see. The whisper seemed to reach into him, touching corners of his mind that had always been closed. He shivered, not from cold, but from the sheer intensity of the moment. He tried to stand, to step away from the spring, but his legs felt heavy, as if the earth itself was holding him. Every part of him wanted to resist, but the pull of the water and the voice was too strong. He realized with a sudden clarity that this was not just water he had drunk. It was a link, a connection to something beyond the ordinary, something that had chosen him without asking. Time seemed to stretch. Minutes, hours, Armin could not tell. The stars above the trees spun slowly and the forest around him felt alive. The voice spoke again, this time gentler, almost curious. "Do not be afraid. You are part of this now. You will understand in time." Armin wanted answers. "Who are you?" he whispered aloud, his voice shaking. But no reply came in words. Instead, a strange calm settled over him, as if the spring itself was breathing around him. He felt a warmth spreading through his chest, and for a moment all fear vanished. The world was sharp, vivid, and alive in ways he had never experienced. He could hear the faint rustle of leaves in the distance, the soft trickle of water from the spring, and even the rhythm of his own heartbeat as though it belonged to the earth. The connection was growing stronger. Images began to flash through his mind, faces of people he had never met, places he had never seen, and moments that felt familiar yet impossible. Each vision was brief, disappearing as quickly as it came, leaving behind a strange sense of knowing. He felt emotions he could not name, sorrow, joy, curiosity, and a strange longing. It was overwhelming, yet he could not turn away. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Armin could not tell. The forest seemed to hum around him, alive with a presence that was both terrifying and beautiful. He realized that he could hear thoughts, not his own, but whispers of feelings from the earth, from the water, and perhaps even from other beings connected to the spring. It was dizzying, almost too much to bear, yet he could not resist. He felt a strange trust forming, a fragile bond with something invisible and powerful. The night deepened further. Moonlight reflected in the water, casting patterns on Armin's face. He realized he had not eaten or drunk anything since he arrived, yet he felt no hunger. Instead, he was filled with an energy unlike any he had known. His mind was sharp, every detail of the forest clear and vivid. He could hear the soft flutter of wings in the distance, the gentle murmur of animals moving through the underbrush, and even the slow, rhythmic pulse of the spring itself. Then the voice came again, clear and insistent. "You belong to me. You cannot leave what has chosen you." Armin closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the words sink deep into him. For a moment, he felt fear, the kind that comes from realizing the world is bigger than you ever imagined. But then, beneath the fear, there was a strange calm, a sense that he had been waiting for this moment all his life. The spring had not just called him, it had known him, had found him in a way no one else could. He opened his eyes, staring at the water. The voice had not spoken aloud, yet he could feel it in every fiber of his being. It was not threatening, not cruel, but firm. It was as if the spring itself had a will, a consciousness that had chosen him for a purpose he could not yet understand. Armin realized that this was only the beginning. The spring had changed something inside him, something that could never be undone. He stayed by the water long into the night, listening to the whispers, feeling the energy that flowed through the spring. The world outside the clearing, the village, the hills, the everyday life he had known, felt distant and small. He was part of something larger now, something invisible yet undeniable. And though he did not know what the future held, he understood one thing clearly: life as he had known it was over. When dawn began to creep over the hills, Armin finally stood. The whispering voice had quieted, but the sense of connection remained. He looked at the spring one last time before turning back toward the village. Everything felt different. The air, the sky, even his own body seemed charged with energy. He knew he had crossed a line, one that could not be uncrossed. And though he could not see what lay ahead, he carried with him the certainty that he had been chosen by something extraordinary, something powerful, and something that would demand a part of him forever. As he walked back through the forest, the whisper returned one last time, softer now, almost like a promise. "Remember, you belong to me, always." Armin did not speak. He only walked, his mind racing with questions he could not yet answer. The village lay ahead, familiar yet distant, and he knew that when he returned, nothing would be the same. The spring had touched him, and from this night forward, his life would follow a path he could not yet see, guided by the invisible force he had just encountered. And so, with each step toward home, Armin carried the weight of the forbidden spring, the whispering voice, and the knowledge that he was now part of a world beyond the ordinary, a world that was waiting for him to discover it, one secret at a time. After that night at the forbidden spring, Armin returned to the village, but nothing felt the same. The familiar streets, the small houses, and the fields he had walked past countless times seemed sharper, more vivid, as if the world itself had been rewritten while he slept. The air smelled different, sweeter and heavier at the same time. Even the sound of the wind through the trees seemed to carry messages he could almost understand. At first, he tried to act normal. He smiled at neighbors, helped with chores, and tended to his small tasks. But inside, he felt a change, a subtle shift that he could not explain and did not fully understand. The first signs appeared the next morning. Armin woke earlier than usual, even before the sun had risen. Normally, he would lie in bed for a while, listening to the soft sounds of the village waking up. But now, he felt restless, almost drawn to stand and move. He walked to the edge of the fields and looked toward the hills where the spring lay hidden. Even from this distance, he could feel its pull, like a faint hum in his chest. The feeling was strange, both comforting and unsettling. He shook his head, telling himself that it was just his imagination, but the sensation would not go away. Over the next few days, the changes became more noticeable. He began noticing things that others did not. He could hear the soft rustle of animals deep in the forest, the faint creak of a distant windmill, and even the rhythm of people's footsteps far down the street. Small details that had once escaped him now stood out clearly, almost painfully. He could sense emotions too, not just from his neighbors but from complete strangers. A smile felt forced, a frown carried real sorrow, and he could almost guess what people were thinking before they said a word. At first, this new awareness was fascinating, almost magical, but it soon became exhausting. Armin found that he could not sleep well. Each night, his dreams were vivid and intense, filled with images of places he had never been, people he had never met, and moments that felt strangely familiar yet impossible. Sometimes he would wake in the middle of the night with the sense that someone, or something, was near him, watching and waiting. The whisper from the spring returned in fragments during these dreams, soft and almost comforting, yet commanding. "You belong to me," it repeated, a reminder that he was no longer entirely his own. The villagers began to notice a change in him as well. Friends who had known Armin for years observed that he was quieter, more withdrawn, and often lost in thought. He would stare at the horizon for long stretches, unresponsive to greetings or questions. Some asked if he was ill, others wondered if he had fallen in love, though nothing had changed in that way. Armin would smile faintly, offering no explanation, knowing that the truth was something they could never understand. Even his daily routines became different. Tasks that had once taken hours were now done almost instinctively. He could repair a broken fence, guide a lost animal, or predict when the weather would change without thinking. His hands moved with precision, his mind alert to patterns and signals that had gone unnoticed before. At first, he felt proud of these abilities, almost thrilled. But soon, he realized that they were not entirely his own. The spring had given him these gifts, yes, but it had also bound him to something he could not see or control. Armin tried to talk to someone about it, to seek advice or understanding, but found that no one could help. The elders of the village, the ones who had warned him about the spring, shook their heads and muttered that some knowledge was not meant for humans. They did not question him directly, but their eyes carried concern and fear. Armin realized that the spring had placed him on a path he could not walk with anyone else. The connection it had created was personal, private, and unbreakable. The voice from the spring returned more often now, not just at night, but in the quiet moments of the day. When he was alone in the fields, it whispered thoughts he could not ignore. When he was walking through the village, it tugged at his attention, guiding him toward places or people without clear reason. At times, the whispers were gentle, almost protective. At other times, they were commanding, insisting that he do things he could not fully understand. Armin felt both fear and trust in equal measure. He knew that resisting completely was impossible, yet he also knew that surrendering entirely was dangerous. One evening, he found himself drawn to the hills again. The village was quiet, the sun setting behind the distant mountains, and he could feel the pull of the spring stronger than ever. He walked for hours without realizing it, following instincts he did not recognize. The forest seemed different at night, alive in ways it had never been before. Shadows moved in patterns that felt purposeful, and the air carried whispers of unseen creatures. Armin's heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from anticipation. He knew that the spring was calling him back, that it had plans for him that were only beginning to unfold. Over time, Armin noticed that he was changing physically as well, though subtly. He moved with more grace, his senses sharper, his reflexes quicker. His eyes seemed to see further, his hearing could catch the faintest of sounds, and he could feel the movement of life around him as if he were part of it. These changes were exhilarating, but they were also isolating. He could no longer fully connect with the villagers. Conversations felt shallow, and human concerns seemed distant compared to the overwhelming awareness that flowed through him. Armin's emotions became harder to control. Moments of joy were intense, almost overwhelming, while sadness hit him with an unexpected weight. He found himself crying over small things, laughing over nothing, or feeling a deep sense of longing for something he could not name. The connection with the spring and the voice had opened a new layer of perception, one that made the ordinary world seem dull and small. He realized that he had glimpsed a reality beyond human understanding, and now his heart and mind were stretched between two worlds, the familiar life of the village and the strange, vast presence of the spring. The villagers began to speak in whispers about him. Some were afraid, others curious. They noticed how he avoided mirrors, how he sometimes stared into empty spaces as if seeing something invisible, and how he no longer joined communal activities. Children were fascinated but also wary. They called him the quiet one who listens to voices, though no one dared ask what he heard. Armin did not mind. He understood that no explanation could satisfy human curiosity. The spring had given him knowledge and perception that could not be shared. One night he found himself dreaming more vividly than ever. In his dream, the spring appeared, glowing softly under a moonless sky. The voice spoke, not as a whisper, but as a presence that surrounded him completely. "You are ready," it said. "The time is coming when you will see the truth. You will understand your place in this world and the choices you must make." Armin awoke with a start, heart pounding, feeling the weight of those words even in the quiet of his small home. He did not yet know what truth awaited him, but he felt certain that his life would never be ordinary again. Days turned into weeks, and Armin continued to adapt to his new reality. He worked, he helped, and he lived among the villagers, yet his connection to the spring remained ever present. It guided him, taught him, and sometimes tested him. He realized that he could not escape it, and perhaps he did not want to. The force that had claimed him was not cruel, but it demanded respect, attention, and understanding. He began to sense that the spring's power was not just about knowledge or perception, but about growth, personal, spiritual, and something beyond explanation. Armin understood one final truth during this time. The spring had not chosen him randomly. He had been drawn to it, and it had been waiting for someone like him, someone curious, observant, and brave enough to seek the unknown. The bond was not only a claim but also an opportunity, a chance to explore life beyond the ordinary, to understand secrets hidden from the world, and to face challenges that few could imagine. And so Armin's life moved forward, balanced between the ordinary and the extraordinary. He walked among the villagers, interacted with friends, and fulfilled his responsibilities, yet he was forever changed. The spring, the voice, and the unseen presence were now part of him, guiding his steps, shaping his perceptions, and reminding him that life was far more complex, mysterious, and beautiful than he had ever believed. As weeks turned into months, Armin felt the presence of the spring grow stronger, not just in the forest but inside him. Its influence was subtle at first, like a soft hum at the edge of his awareness, but it began to grow louder, harder to ignore. It was as if the spring had a consciousness of its own, a will that stretched beyond its hidden waters, reaching into his life and guiding him in ways he could not yet fully understand. The changes in Armin were becoming noticeable to those around him, though he still tried to maintain the appearance of normal life. He spent his days helping in the village, tending to animals, repairing fences, or assisting neighbors with their work. Yet he often found himself distracted, his mind wandering to the hills, to the forest, and to the secret place that had claimed him. Sometimes he would leave tasks unfinished, compelled by an invisible force to walk toward the spring, even when it was inconvenient or unsafe. It was during one of these walks that he first realized how deeply the spring had affected him. He had been working in a neighbor's field, repairing a small stone wall, when he suddenly felt an urge to stop and listen. At first he thought it was the wind, but the sound was too deliberate, too patterned to be random. Following the pull, he walked toward the forest's edge. As he entered the trees, he felt the spring's presence more intensely, as if the forest itself was alive and aware of him. Each step felt guided, purposeful, and he realized he was no longer moving by choice alone. The forest seemed to respond to him now. Leaves shifted as he passed, the air seemed to bend toward him, and the faint sound of trickling water grew louder. When he reached the clearing where the spring lay hidden, he felt the energy wrap around him like a cloak, comforting yet commanding. It was here, at the edge of the water, that he began to notice the visions, moments and memories that were not his own, yet felt familiar. Faces appeared in the reflections of the water, eyes staring at him, conveying messages he could not understand. Places he had never visited stretched out before him, landscapes both beautiful and terrifying. At first, Armin was frightened. He stepped back, shaken by the intensity of what he saw. But the spring's presence, the voice that had whispered to him before, calmed him. "Do not be afraid," it said. "You are ready to see more, to understand what has always been hidden." The voice was not loud, but it carried a weight that pressed into his thoughts, guiding him toward comprehension rather than fear. Over time, Armin realized that these visions were lessons of a sort. The spring showed him the lives of others who had come before, people who had drunk from its waters, each one changed forever. Some had gained wisdom beyond human understanding, while others had vanished, lost to the influence of the water. The spring revealed choices, consequences, and patterns, teaching Armin that its power was not random. It chose carefully, binding those who were capable of understanding its depth and purpose. The bond between Armin and the spring began to shape his daily life. He noticed that he could sense danger before it happened, feel emotions that were not his own, and understand events before they unfolded. At first, these abilities were startling, even overwhelming. He would wake in the middle of the night, heart racing, feeling the presence of someone approaching the village or sensing a storm hours before it arrived. Sometimes he tried to ignore it, to live an ordinary life, but the spring would not let him. Its influence was persistent, growing stronger each day. The voice became more constant, no longer just whispers in dreams or moments of solitude. It guided his decisions, advised him in subtle ways, and occasionally tested him. "Do you understand your place?" it asked one night as Armin sat by the water staring into its depths. "Do you see the path that lies ahead?" Armin realized that the spring was teaching him patience, observation, and careful judgment. Every choice he made now carried weight, influenced by forces he could not fully comprehend. The influence of the spring also brought a sense of isolation. Though he walked among the villagers, spoke to friends, and participated in their routines, he felt a distance growing between them and him. They could not understand what he had experienced, nor could he explain it in words. Conversations felt shallow, and ordinary concerns seemed trivial compared to the vastness of the spring's knowledge and influence. At times, he wondered if he had become too different, too changed to ever return fully to the life he had known. One afternoon, as he walked through the village, he felt a sudden pull toward the forest. Without thinking, he left the streets behind and followed the invisible guidance of the spring. The forest was darker now, denser, and more alive than ever before. Every sound seemed amplified, every movement deliberate. Armin's senses were heightened. He could hear the faintest shift of leaves, smell the life hidden within the soil, and feel the energy flowing through the trees. The spring's presence was no longer limited to the clearing. It extended into the forest, stretching outward like a living network. At the clearing, he knelt by the water again, feeling its cool touch on his hands. The voice spoke directly into his mind this time. "You are ready to understand the truth," it said. "Not all who come here are prepared. Many are drawn by curiosity alone, but you have the patience, the courage, and the heart to see what must be seen." Armin felt a shiver of anticipation. He did not yet know what truth awaited him, but he sensed it was monumental, something that would alter the course of his life forever. The following nights brought more visions. He saw glimpses of history, people and places connected to the spring over centuries. He saw struggles, triumphs, failures, and sacrifices. The spring revealed that its influence had been present long before him, a force quietly guiding, testing, and transforming those it chose. Armin began to understand that he was not simply a participant, but a continuation of a story that had been unfolding for generations. With understanding came responsibility. The voice guided him in subtle ways, teaching him that his choices now affected not only his own life, but the lives of those around him. One day, he noticed that his intuition about people was no longer limited to observing them. He could sense intentions and emotions, often before they acted. This awareness allowed him to help in ways he had never imagined, preventing accidents, calming conflicts, and providing guidance that seemed uncanny to those around him. Yet, the knowledge carried a burden. Armin realized that not everyone he encountered could be helped, and some forces were beyond his control. He felt the weight of decisions that affected not just himself, but the balance of lives around him. It was both empowering and terrifying. The spring's gift was not simple, nor was it safe. Every insight carried responsibility, and every action demanded thoughtfulness and care. The connection also revealed secrets of the past. He learned that the spring had been part of ancient rituals, a source of guidance and transformation for those who understood its power. He saw glimpses of people who had vanished, leaving only whispers and shadows behind. Their experiences served as warnings, teaching him patience, humility, and respect. The spring demanded not obedience, but understanding. It tested the heart, the mind, and the courage of those who drank from it. Armin's life became a balance between ordinary and extraordinary, between the village he called home and the force that had claimed him. He still walked among friends, still helped with chores, and still participated in daily life, yet his thoughts were often elsewhere, caught between the present and the guidance of the spring. At times, he felt loneliness, the kind that comes from knowing something others cannot. But at other times, he felt awe and gratitude, knowing that he had been chosen for a path few could even imagine. The presence of the spring, the voice, and the visions became a constant companion. Armin understood that his life had been changed irreversibly, that the world he had known was only a fraction of reality. The spring had given him perception, knowledge, and insight, but it had also demanded a part of him in return. He felt the invisible bond in every heartbeat, every thought, and every choice. The forest, the water, and the whispers were now part of him, inseparable from his being. And so Armin continued, walking between worlds, the familiar village and the mysterious hidden force that had claimed him. The spring's lessons were ongoing, its presence unyielding. He learned to listen, to observe, to act with care, and to respect the vastness of the world he had been introduced to. Every day brought new understanding, new challenges, and new glimpses of truths hidden from ordinary life. The spring was not only a source of power, but a teacher, a guide, and a test. It demanded courage, patience, and insight. And Armin, though changed, learned to meet each day with awareness, knowing that the bond he had formed was permanent, and that the path ahead, though uncertain, was filled with possibilities beyond imagination. Time passed, and Armin felt the presence of the spring growing, stronger every day. Its influence was no longer a faint hum or a whisper in dreams. It had become a constant companion, guiding him, shaping his thoughts, and reaching deep into his soul. He could no longer ignore it. The gift he had received came with responsibilities, lessons, and choices, and now the time had come for him to face the greatest decision of his life. The first morning of this realization began like any other. Armin woke before sunrise, the soft light of dawn brushing over the village. But today, the air felt heavier, charged with energy he could not yet understand. His heart beat faster than usual, not from exertion, but from anticipation. The spring had not spoken to him directly yet, but he felt its presence in every step, every breath, every thought. It was as if the spring itself had been waiting for this day, waiting for him to choose a path that would define his future. Armin walked to the edge of the village toward the forest. The path felt familiar yet foreign, each step resonating with a strange energy that guided him forward. Birds sang softly, the wind whispered through the trees, and the air smelled earthy, rich, and alive. He reached the clearing where the spring waited, its water sparkling as if reflecting not just the moonlight, but all of the choices, events, and possibilities he had encountered. For a moment, he simply stood there, feeling the pull, feeling the power, and feeling the responsibility that had been building for months. He knelt by the water, placing his hands gently on its surface. It was colder than any water he had ever touched, sharp and almost alive. The voice returned, clear and commanding, yet not unkind. "You have learned much," it said. "You understand the world beyond ordinary sight. You feel, perceive, and know. But now the time has come to choose. Will you surrender entirely, or will you walk your own path?" Armin closed his eyes, letting the words sink into him. He had experienced so much. The visions, the heightened senses, the whispers of lives long gone, the guidance, the responsibility. He had felt the awe and the fear, the joy and the sorrow, and he knew that surrendering completely would mean leaving the life he had known behind forever. Yet resisting could be even harder, for the spring had claimed a part of him already, a part that could not be removed. He thought of the village, of his neighbors and friends, of the ordinary world he had once been part of. He thought of the forests, the hills, and the secret place that had changed him. The memories were vivid, and the choice seemed impossible. The spring did not demand blind obedience, but it required understanding, trust, and courage. To fully surrender meant becoming one with its power, losing a part of himself, yet gaining a perspective and knowledge beyond human comprehension. To resist meant living a life divided, constantly aware of a force he could never fully escape, forever feeling its pull. Armin's mind wandered back to the visions the spring had shown him. Faces of those who had come before, places of power and beauty, moments of joy and tragedy, they all seemed to call to him now, urging him to decide. He remembered the lessons he had learned: patience, observation, responsibility, and humility. He realized that the spring's power was not merely about strength or knowledge, but about understanding the balance between choice and consequence. Every action mattered, and every decision would shape not just his life, but the world around him in ways he could not yet see. The sun rose higher, casting light on the clearing, making the water shimmer like liquid glass. Armin felt the pull intensify, stronger than ever before. The voice spoke again, softer this time, almost like a gentle nudge. Do not fear what comes next. Whatever choice you make will be your own, but know that once chosen, the path cannot be undone. Armin took a deep breath. He realized that surrendering completely meant embracing the unknown, letting go of the past, and trusting the spring to guide him. It meant accepting that he would be changed in ways no one could understand. It meant giving a part of himself to something greater, invisible, yet undeniably real. But he also understood that this surrender was not weakness. It was courage. The courage to accept a new reality, to step into a world beyond human limits. He knelt by the spring, feeling its cool touch on his palms, and whispered, "I am ready." The water seemed to respond, rippling in patterns that reflected light and shadow, past and future, knowledge and mystery. The voice enveloped him, warm and firm, guiding him, connecting him, merging the lessons, visions, and insights into a single understanding. Armin felt energy coursing through him, flowing into his very being, as if the spring itself had become part of his mind, heart, and soul. In that moment, he understood truths he had only glimpsed before. He saw the cycles of life and death, the patterns of choices and consequences, the invisible threads that connected people, places, and events. He saw how the spring had touched others, how its presence had guided, tested, and transformed countless lives over generations. And he saw himself, not as a passive observer, but as a participant, chosen to continue the story, to learn, grow, and act with wisdom and courage. The world around him shifted subtly. The forest seemed more alive, the wind carried messages, and the water shimmered with possibilities. He felt connected to everything: the earth beneath his feet, the trees around him, the animals in the distance, and even the villagers who remained unaware of the forces shaping his life. It was both exhilarating and humbling, a mixture of awe and responsibility that he had never imagined. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Time seemed to lose its usual meaning. Armin remained by the spring, listening to the voice, feeling its guidance, and letting the knowledge flow through him. He realized that surrendering did not mean losing himself completely. It meant embracing a new version of himself, one capable of understanding and acting beyond ordinary limits. It was a partnership, a bond that required trust, awareness, and courage. Eventually, he rose, feeling a calm certainty he had never known before. The spring had chosen him, yes, but it had also prepared him. He understood that life would never be ordinary again, but it would be full of meaning, insight, and connection. The whispers were no longer frightening. They were guidance, reminders, and companions. The world had opened up, revealing layers of reality he had never imagined, and he was ready to navigate them. Armin walked back toward the village slowly, feeling the energy of the forest and the spring within him. Each step was deliberate, grounded, yet aware of the invisible threads connecting him to the world around him. The villagers went about their day, unaware of the transformation within him. Armin smiled faintly, knowing that he carried a secret, a gift, and a responsibility far beyond ordinary life. As days turned into weeks, Armin's new life unfolded. He applied the lessons of the spring in small ways, helping neighbors with insights they could not understand, sensing dangers before they arrived, and guiding situations toward balance and harmony. He no longer felt isolated in fear. Instead, he felt part of a larger pattern, a continuum of lives and stories connected by unseen forces. Each day brought new challenges, new understanding, and new ways to act with wisdom and care. At night, when he returned to the clearing, the spring greeted him like an old friend. The water shimmered, reflecting his image and the countless possibilities of the future. The voice spoke softly, encouraging, reminding, guiding. "You belong to me," it said, not as a command but as a statement of connection. And Armin, with full awareness, accepted it, not as loss, but as the beginning of a life larger, richer, and more extraordinary than he had ever imagined. He had faced the choice and embraced it. The spring's gift was now a part of him, permanent and alive. He understood the responsibility, the knowledge, and the power it brought. He walked between the ordinary and extraordinary, the familiar and the unknown, carrying both the weight and the beauty of what he had chosen. And in that choice, he found a new sense of purpose, a deeper understanding of the world, and a connection that would guide him for the rest of his life. The spring remained, waiting, watching, and shimmering under the moon and stars. It had claimed a part of Armin, and in return, it had given him a life beyond ordinary understanding. And though the villagers continued their simple lives, unaware of the hidden world around them, Armin knew the truth. He was part of something greater, something timeless, and something extraordinary. His journey had only begun, and he would follow the path the spring had laid out, learning, growing, and embracing the unknown, forever changed, forever connected, forever chosen.